December 7, 1941, West Point Military Academy. Captain James Montgomery stood frozen before the radio in the officer's lounge. The crackling voice described scenes of destruction at Pearl Harbor that seemed impossible to comprehend. Japanese planes, American ships burning, thousands dead. "My God," whispered a voice beside him. Major Williams, a mathematics instructor, stood slack-jawed and pale. But James felt something different. Not just shock, but a strange sense of inevitability. 3 generations of Montgomery men had answered America's call to arms. His grandfather with the Renault tanks in the Great War. His father with the first Shermans in North Africa. Now it was his turn. The students filed into his classroom the next morning with solemn faces. James Montgomery, known to friends as Iron Jack since his football days, abandoned his planned lecture on artillery trajectories. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice steady despite having slept just 2 hours. "Yesterday, our nation was attacked without provocation. Today, we prepare to respond. Remember everything you learn within these walls. Soon, you'll need it." After class, Jack strode purposefully across the academy grounds toward the administration building. Snow crunched beneath his boots, the Hudson River a steel gray ribbon in the distance. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "There are 2 types of officers, Jackie boy. Those who lead from behind a desk and those who lead from the turret." Colonel Peterson looked up from his paperwork as Jack entered his office. "Montgomery, I expected you." "Sir, I request immediate transfer to an active combat unit." Peterson sighed. "You're one of our best instructors, Jack. These cadets need you." "With respect, sir, our men overseas will need experienced officers. My father and grandfather were tankers. It's in my blood." "And your wife? Elizabeth is expecting, isn't she?" Jack's jaw tightened. He'd agonized over this all night. Elizabeth sleeping peacefully beside him, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Their first child was due in just 3 months. "Sir, I've discussed it with Elizabeth. She understands." This was not entirely true. The conversation that morning had ended with tears and slammed doors. Elizabeth's final words hung heavy in his mind. "Your father chose the tank over his family too. Look how that ended." Peterson studied him for a long moment. "I'll see what I can do. But remember, Montgomery, there's no shame in serving your country by training its officers." "My grandfather always said a Montgomery belongs in a tank, sir, not behind a lectern." That evening, Jack sat at his desk at home, composing a letter to his unborn child. The words wouldn't come. How could he explain choices he barely understood himself? Elizabeth entered silently, her eyes still red-rimmed. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have mentioned your father." Jack covered her hand with his. "No, you were right to. Dad chose the tanks, and he died inside one. Are you trying to find him out there? Is that what this is about?" Jack had no answer. His father's death in North Africa in 1942 had left a void that nothing seemed to fill. Captain Robert Montgomery, tank commander, killed when his M3 Lee took a direct hit from German artillery. Jack had been 17, suddenly the man of the family with his mother retreating into grief, from which she never fully emerged. "I don't know, Liz. I just know I can't stay here while other men fight." She knelt beside him, her pregnant belly making it awkward. "Promise me something then. Promise me you'll come home. This child needs their father. I need my husband." Jack pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I promise." A promise he had no right to make. 2 weeks later, Jack received his orders. 2nd Armored Brigade, the same unit his grandfather had served with in the First World War. The old man would have appreciated the symmetry. Jack's farewell to Elizabeth at the train station was brief. Too many words would only make it harder. "I'll write every day," he promised. "Just come back to us." She pressed his hand against her belly. "Both of us." Fort Knox, Kentucky greeted him with bitter cold in the thunder of tank engines. The 2nd Armored Brigade was preparing for deployment, the massive assembly yards filled with M4 Sherman tanks fresh from the factories. Jack reported to headquarters, a repurposed administration building now humming with activity. "Captain Montgomery reporting for duty, sir." Colonel Frank Harrison, a barrel-chested man with a scar across his left cheek, looked up from his maps. "Montgomery? Robert Montgomery's boy?" "Yes, sir. Your father was a damn fine tank commander. Served under me in North Africa." Harrison's eyes darkened. "I wrote the letter to your mother." Jack stiffened. "Thank you for your words, sir. They meant a lot to her." Harrison nodded. "There's someone you should meet. Sergeant, get Harkins in here." Minutes later, a weathered man with white hair, cut military short, entered the office. Despite his age, he stood ramrod straight, his uniform immaculate. Master Sergeant William Harkins, sir. Harrison smiled. Harkins, this is Captain Montgomery, Robert's son. The old sergeant's eyes widened slightly. Montgomery? Any relation to Lieutenant Thomas Montgomery, 2nd Armored Great War? My grandfather, Jack replied, surprised. Harkins broke into a rare smile. Well, I'll be damned. I served with your grandfather at Saint Mihiel, drove his Renault while he commanded. He extended a gnarled hand. They called him Iron Tom. Jack shook the offered hand, feeling a connection to his past. They call me Iron Jack sometimes. Must run in the family, Harkins chuckled. Your grandfather was the toughest son of a gun I ever met. Took a piece of shrapnel in his leg and still led the advance. Colonel Harrison interrupted. Harkins here is our senior tank instructor. Been with armor since it was called the tank course. He'll get you acquainted with our Shermans. Outside, Harkins led Jack across the muddy yard toward the massive hangar where rows of Sherman tanks awaited their crews. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, grease, and steel. You ever been inside a Sherman, Captain? Only in training exercises. My father wrote about them, though. Said they were a vast improvement over the Lees. Harkins snorted. Damn sight better, yes. Still undergunned compared to what the Krauts have, but we make do with speed and numbers. He patted the side of the nearest tank affectionately. This here's our workhorse, M4A3 Sherman, 75mm main gun, 230 caliber machine guns, 150 caliber on top. 5-man crew. Jack ran his hand along the cold steel hull. Somewhere in North Africa, his father had died in a tank not so different from this one. The thought should have been chilling, but instead Jack felt a strange sense of connection. Sir, Harkins said, interrupting his thoughts, word around camp is you're quite the tactician. They say at West Point you developed some new ideas about armored warfare. Jack nodded slowly. I've been studying the German blitzkrieg tactics. I believe we can adapt and improve upon them. It's not just about the machines, but how we use them in concert with infantry, artillery, and air support. The brass giving you a command? Not immediately. Colonel Harrison wants me to help with training for now. Apparently, my classroom experience has some value after all. Harkins smiled knowingly. Don't worry, sir. Once we ship out, commands will open up fast enough. Over the next 2 months, Jack threw himself into training the tank crews. He developed what he called the Iron Triangle approach. Firepower, mobility, and communication in perfect balance. His crews learned to operate as a single organism, 5 men moving and thinking as one inside their steel behemoth. Each night, Jack wrote to Elizabeth. Her letters in return spoke of her growing discomfort, the baby kicking strongly. She'd moved in with her parents in Philadelphia to have help with the baby after birth. Each letter closed the same way. We're waiting for you to come home. In March, Jack received news that deployment was imminent. The 2nd Armored would be shipping to England within 2 weeks, then onward to join the fighting in Europe. That same day, a telegram arrived from Philadelphia. Elizabeth hospitalized, stop complications with pregnancy, stop come if possible, stop. Jack took the telegram straight to Colonel Harrison's office. The colonel read it silently, his face grim. I need emergency leave, sir, just 3 days. Harrison sighed heavily. I can't, Jack. We're deploying in 10 days, no leave approvals for any personnel. Sir, my wife could be dying. And in 2 months, you could be leading men who depend on you for their lives. Harrison's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, son. I truly am, but we're at war. Jack spent that night pacing his barracks, torn between duty and family. By morning, another telegram arrived. Elizabeth stable, stop, baby. Lost, stop. She asked for you, stop. The words blurred before his eyes. Their child. Gone. And he wasn't there to hold Elizabeth, to share in their grief. For the first time since joining the army, Jack questioned his choices. Sergeant Harkins found him sitting alone in the tank hangar an hour later, the telegram crumpled in his fist. Bad news from home, sir? Jack looked up, not bothering to hide his red eyes. My wife lost our baby, and I can't go to her. Harkins sat beside him on the ammunition crate, his old joints creaking. War takes from all of us, Captain, not just on the battlefield. I should be with her. Yes, you should, Harkins agreed simply. But you're here instead because men like us carry a different burden. Your grandfather understood that. Your father too. Did they? Or did they just choose the tanks over everything else? Harkins considered this. Your grandfather once told me something I never forgot. He said, I fight not because I love war, but because I love what I'm protecting. He missed your father's birth, was in France, but everything he did was for his family's future. Jack stared at the massive Sherman before them. And what future did that give my father? He died at 34, buried in the North African sand. He died protecting what he loved, Captain, same as you would. That night, Jack wrote the most difficult letter of his life to Elizabeth, explaining why he couldn't come home, trying to share his grief across an ocean, soon to separate them. Whether she would understand or ever forgive him, he didn't know. The crossing to England aboard the Queen Mary was mercifully uneventful, though the ship zigzagged constantly to avoid German U-boats. Jack spent the time studying maps of Normandy and training his men. Colonel Harrison had given him command of a company of tanks within the battalion, 15 Shermans and their crews, now his responsibility. His command tank, which tradition allowed him to name, he christened Thunderbolt after his father's tank in North Africa. The name was painted on the gun barrel in bold white letters, alongside an image of a fist clutching lightning. In England, final preparations for the invasion consumed every waking moment. Jack's company trained relentlessly, practicing beach landings with specially modified Shermans, equipped with waterproofing for the turret and engine. They would be among the second wave at Normandy, following the initial infantry assault. 2 days before the scheduled invasion, Jack finalized his crew assignments. For his own tank, he selected the best men he could find. Sergeant Mike Rawlins, a former hunting guide from Montana, would serve as his gunner. With uncanny marksmanship and steady hands, Rawlins could hit a target at maximum range while the tank was in motion. Corporal Bob Doc Peterson, a medical school student before the war, became his loader. Quick thinking and methodical, Peterson could load the heavy 75mm shells faster than anyone in the company. Private Charlie Wilson, a stock car racer from North Carolina, took the driver's position. Wilson could make the 30-ton Sherman dance like a ballerina, finding traction where none seemed to exist. Finally, Private Frank Martinez, a former Golden Gloves boxer from New Mexico, would operate the bow machine gun and serve as assistant driver. Compact and powerful, Martinez had the strength to handle the physically demanding role. The night before embarkation, Jack gathered his crew around Thunderbolt for a final briefing. Tomorrow do we load on to the LSTs. The day after, we hit the beaches of Normandy. Jack looked each man in the eye. Inside this tank, we're not just a crew, we're a family. Each of you does your job, and we all come home. That's the Montgomery guarantee. Heard your old man was a tanker too, Captain, Rawlins said. He was. Died in North Africa in '42. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed. Well, Martinez said finally, guess we better not let you down then. The channel crossing was a nightmare of seasickness and tension. Their LST, landing ship, tank, pitched in the rough seas, the tanks secured to the deck with heavy chains. The men huddled below, some praying, others writing what might be final letters home. Jack found Wilson vomiting over the side, his normally ruddy face pale and drawn. First time at sea, Private? Wilson wiped his mouth. Yes, sir. Give me a dirt track any day. Just think of it as a very bumpy road, Jack suggested with a smile. We'll be on solid ground soon enough. Then the real fun begins. Dawn on June 6, 1944, broke gray and stormy. The invasion, already delayed once due to weather, would proceed despite the conditions. Through the mist, Jack could see the coastline of France, deceptively peaceful from a distance. The thunder of naval guns and the distant crump of explosions told a different story. Their LST was assigned to land at Gold Beach, supporting the British 50th Infantry Division. The first wave of infantry had gone in hours earlier, and reports filtering back suggested heavy casualties but progress inland. As they approached the beach, Jack gathered his crew inside Thunderbolt. The tank was sealed for water crossing, the engine running, ready to drive off the LST once the bow doors opened. Remember your training, Jack said over the intercom. Stay buttoned up until we're off the beach. Martinez, keep your eyes on those bluffs. Wilson, don't stop for anything once we hit the sand. Doc, load high explosive first. Rawlins, watch for bunkers. The tank rocked violently as the LST grounded on the beach. Moments later, the bow doors swung open, revealing a scene from hell. The beach was strewn with obstacles, burning vehicles, and bodies. Machine gun fire stitched the sand, and artillery shells exploded in geysers of water and earth. Driver forward, Jack commanded. Thunderbolt roared down the ramp, hitting the shallow water with a tremendous splash. Wilson gunned the engine, the treads churning through the surf. Water sloshed against the hull, but the waterproofing held. Ahead, a disabled Sherman burned fiercely, its crew nowhere to be seen. "Gunner bunker at 2 o'clock, Jack called, spotting a concrete emplacement on the bluff. "Identified," Rollins replied calmly. "On the way." Thunderbolt's main gun roared, the 75mm shell smashing into the bunker. A secondary explosion suggested they'd hit an ammunition cache. "Good shot. Driver, keep moving. Aim for that gap in the seawall." They lurched forward, nearly bogging down in soft sand before Wilson found firmer ground. Two more Shermans from their company emerged from the water behind them, forming a wedge. Machine gun fire pinged off Thunderbolt's armor like angry hornets. "Bowgunner, troops in the trench, 10 o'clock. Martinez opened up with the .30 caliber, sweeping the German position. Bodies tumbled like rag dolls. "Captain," Doc's voice crackled over the intercom, "the rest of the company is coming in too far east. They're heading into that minefield." Jack swiveled his periscope. Sure enough, the remaining tanks were veering toward an area marked on their maps as a suspected minefield. The naval bombardment had destroyed many of the beach markers, disorienting the follow-on waves. "Rollins, red smoke on that minefield now." The gunner loaded a smoke shell and fired. Red smoke billowed, marking the danger area. Most of the tanks adjusted course, but one continued forward, either not seeing the warning or unable to change direction. The explosion lifted the Sherman's right track clean off, leaving it crippled and exposed. German artillery immediately adjusted fire onto the disabled tank. "Wilson, get us to that tank. We'll give them cover to evacuate." Thunderbolt accelerated up the beach, zigzagging to avoid becoming an easy target. They pulled alongside the damaged Sherman just as his crew began bailing out. Artillery shells landed closer, showering them with sand and shrapnel. "Get behind us," Jack shouted to the tank commander through his open hatch. Machine gun fire from the bluffs intensified. One of the escaping crewmen jerked and fell, blood spreading across his chest. Jack dropped down inside Thunderbolt, grabbing the .50 caliber mounted on his hatch. "Martinez, smoke screen, 3 o'clock. Wilson, back up 10 yards, then forward on my mark." The smoke shells created a temporary screen. Jack waited until the surviving crew from the disabled tank had taken cover behind Thunderbolt, then gave the order to move. Wilson gunned the engine and they surged forward, providing a moving shield for the men on foot. At the seawall, infantry from the first wave huddled in relative safety. Jack directed the survivors to join them, then returned his attention to the battlefield. Their company was scattered across the beach, some tanks still struggling through the surf, others engaged with German positions. "All Thunderbolt elements, this is Iron 6, Jack broadcast to his company. "Rally at the seawall breach. Grid coordinates Baker 3. Provide covering fire for infantry advance." One by one, the surviving Shermans acknowledged, converging on Jack's position. Of the 15 tanks in his company, 12 had made it ashore. 3 were lost to mines or artillery before firing a single shot. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Iron 6, this is Steel 6. What's your status?" "Steel 6, Iron 6, 12 operational, positioned at Baker 3, awaiting orders." "Iron 6, new objective. Infantry pinned down at Crepon, 2 clicks inland. Route appears clear through St. Gabriel. Get there and clear those positions." "Understood, Steel 6. Iron 6 out." Jack studied his map. St. Gabriel lay directly ahead, but the route would take them through open fields with little cover. Perfect killing ground for the German 88s that had chewed up so many Shermans in North Africa. "All Thunderbolt elements, form column. We're moving inland. Maintain 50-yard spacing. Gunners, watch those hedgerows." The column of tanks moved cautiously forward, infantry crouching in their protective shadow. The initial resistance at the beach had been broken, but the real battle for Normandy was just beginning. St. Gabriel appeared deserted as they approached, a picturesque French village seemingly untouched by war. Jack knew better. Every window, every doorway could conceal an anti-tank gun or Panzerfaust team. "Slow advance. Martinez, watch those upper windows." They were halfway through the village when the attack came. Not from the buildings, but from behind a stone wall at the far end. An armor-piercing shell screamed past Thunderbolt, missing by inches, and detonated against the Sherman behind them. The tank brewed up immediately, flames shooting from the open hatches as the ammunition cooked off. "Panther, 3 o'clock, Rollins shouted. "Behind the stone wall." "Identified," Jack confirmed. "Wilson, hard right. Get us behind that church. Doc, load armor piercing." Thunderbolt lurched right, its tracks throwing up cobblestones as Wilson executed a tight turn. The Panther fired again, the shell ricocheting off a building as they found cover behind the church's thick stone walls. All tanks, enemy Panther at grid Delta 7, circle left and right, hit from both sides. The remaining Shermans split as ordered, moving to flank the German tank. The Panther, recognizing the danger, began to back away, seeking its own escape route. "We've got him," Jack declared. "Wilson, forward to the corner. Rawlins, be ready when we clear the church." Thunderbolt edged forward until its gun barrel could bear on the retreating Panther. At the same moment, two Shermans appeared on the German tank's flank. "Fire!" 3 Sherman guns fired almost simultaneously. 2 shots missed, but Rawlins' round struck the Panther's side armor at an angle, penetrating the thinner plating. The German tank shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from its engine compartment. "Good shot, Rawlins!" The victory was short-lived. From the church tower above them, a sudden explosion rocked Thunderbolt. A German soldier with a Panzerfaust had been hiding in the belfry. "We're hit!" Wilson shouted. "Oil pressure dropping!" Jack quickly assessed the damage. The Panzerfaust had struck their rear deck, damaging the engine but not penetrating the crew compartment. "Martinez, that tower!" The bow machine gun chattered, sweeping the church tower. The German soldier fell, tumbling down the steep roof to land broken on the cobblestones below. "Wilson, can we move?" "Barely, sir. Engine's overheating. Won't last long. Get us out of the village. We need repairs." Thunderbolt limped out of St. Gabriel, trailing smoke and oil. Once clear of the village, Jack ordered the engine shut down to prevent a fire. The rest of the company had cleared the remaining German resistance and continued toward Crepin. As Jack surveyed the damage, Colonel Harrison arrived in a jeep, accompanied by an intelligence officer. "Rough welcome to France, Captain," Harrison remarked. "Could have been worse, sir. That was quick thinking with the flanking maneuver. Took out that Panther clean." Harrison nodded appreciatively, then lowered his voice. "We've got bigger problems. Intelligence suggests the Germans are rushing reinforcements to Caen, Panzer Division, some of their best." Jack examined the map Harrison produced. "They'll cut right across our advance." "Exactly. Divisions ordered a rapid push inland to secure crossroads before they arrive." Harrison pointed to the map. "Your company will lead the advance once your tank is repaired. We need to reach this junction by nightfall." Jack studied the terrain. "That's open ground most of the way. We'll be exposed." "Can't be helped. Speed is essential." Harrison clapped him on the shoulder. "Get your tank fixed and your men ready. You move out in 1 hour." As Harrison departed, Sergeant Rawlins approached, wiping grease from his hands. "Engineers say they can get us running again, but we'll need a complete engine overhaul later." "We don't have later. We move in an hour." "Where to?" Jack showed him the map. "We're racing German reinforcements to this crossroads. Whole operation could depend on it." Rawlins whistled. "That's mighty open country, Captain." "I know. Tell the men we'll use the iron triangle approach. Maximum speed, communication, and firepower. No stopping for anything less than a direct hit." While engineers worked frantically on Thunderbolt's engine, Jack checked on the rest of his company. 3 more tanks had been lost in the village fighting, leaving him with 8 operational Shermans. Against the Panzer Lehr, they would be severely outgunned and outnumbered. The repair crew chief approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "She'll run, Captain, but I can't guarantee for how long. Patch the oil lines and jury-rig the cooling system. Treat her gentle." "No promises in war," Jack replied, "but thank you." Within the hour, the diminished company was moving again, Thunderbolt in the lead despite its wounds. They pushed inland at maximum speed, bypassing pockets of resistance, focused solely on reaching the crucial crossroads before the German reinforcements. As sunset approached, they crested a ridge and saw their objective below, a simple country crossroads where several key routes intersected. No sign of German armor yet. "We made it," Wilson said over the intercom, relief evident in his voice. "Don't celebrate yet," Jack cautioned. "Form defensive perimeter. Rawlins, keep your eyes on that tree line to the east." The tanks arranged themselves in a circle, guns pointing outward. Infantry began digging in around them as artillery units set up their guns on the reverse slope. Jack reported their arrival to Colonel Harrison, who promised reinforcements by morning. As darkness fell, an eerie quiet descended over the countryside. The distant rumble of naval guns on the coast provided a continuous bass note to the symphony of war, but their immediate area remained still. Too still. "I don't like this," Martinez muttered. "Where are they?" Jack had been wondering the same thing. Intelligence had been certain the Panzer Lehr would be pushing for this junction, yet there was no sign of German armor. At midnight, A motorcycle messenger arrived from battalion headquarters with updated orders. Jack unfolded the message under the red glow of his flashlight. Intelligence update. Stop. German column diverted to Bayeux. Stop. Hold position. Await further orders. Stop. Diverted to Bayeux, Jack muttered. That doesn't make sense. Bayeux is already secure. He studied his map again, tracing routes with his finger. If the Germans were indeed heading for Bayeux, they would pass through. Jack's blood ran cold. St. Gabriel. He snatched up his radio handset. Steel 6, this is Iron 6. Urgent message over. Static answered him. The damaged radio and Thunderbolt, patched together like the engine, couldn't reach battalion headquarters miles away. Rollins, Jack called. Get to Able Company's command tank. Use their radio. Tell battalion, I think we've been fed bad intelligence. The German column isn't heading for Bayeux. It's a feint. They're doubling back through St. Gabriel to hit the beach. We're in the wrong position. Rollins sprinted across the perimeter to the neighboring company's command tank. Minutes later, he returned, shaking his head. Radio operator says Colonel Harrison is forward with the reconnaissance elements. They can't reach him either. Jack faced an impossible choice. His orders were clear. Hold this position. But his instincts screamed that they were being outmaneuvered, that the critical point was now St. Gabriel, which they had left lightly defended. Captain orders? Rollins pressed. The faces of his crew watched him expectantly in the dim light of Thunderbolt's interior. Jack thought of his father, of the decisions he must have faced in those final moments in North Africa, of his grandfather at St. Mihiel pressing forward despite his wounds. Wilson, start the engine. Martinez, alert the other tanks. We're moving back to St. Gabriel. Sir, Rollins said cautiously, that's directly countermanding orders. I know exactly what I'm doing, Sergeant. If I'm wrong, I'll face a court-martial. If I'm right, there won't be anyone left to court-martial me if we don't move now. The engine coughed to life, still running rough from its hasty repairs. One by one, the other tanks in the company acknowledged the order to move out, though Jack could hear the doubt in some commanders' voices. They retraced their road in darkness, running without lights, using only the ambient moonlight to navigate. Jack stood in the open turret, scanning the horizon for any sign of German movement. They were still 5 miles from St. Gabriel when the night sky to the east erupted in flashes. The distant crump of artillery and the distinctive sound of tank guns carried clearly in the still air. Contact at St. Gabriel, Jack announced grimly. Wilson, maximum speed. Thunderbolt's damaged engine protested as Wilson pushed it to its limits. The temperature gauge climbed into the red zone and ominous knocking sounds emanated from the rear deck. But the faithful machine held together, leading the column back toward the embattled village. As they approached, the scale of the German attack became clear. A full panzer regiment had indeed bypassed the crossroads, circling around to strike at the vulnerable supply lines running from the beaches. American and British rear echelon units, caught by surprise, were fighting desperately to hold the village. All tanks, spread out. Engage targets of opportunity, Jack ordered. Focus on their armor first. Thunderbolt crested a small rise, giving them a clearer view of the battlefield. German Panzer IVs had penetrated the western edge of the village, their distinctive silhouettes visible in the light of burning buildings. American anti-tank guns fired desperately from hastily prepared positions. Gunner, Panzer IV, 800 yards, 2 o'clock, Jack directed. Identified, Rollins confirmed. Firing now. Thunderbolt's main gun roared. The shell struck the Panzer's turret, detonating against the thicker frontal armor without penetrating. But the German tank noticed them, its turrets swinging in their direction. Wilson, move! Get us hull down behind that hedgerow! The Sherman lurched forward just as the Panzer fired. The German shell passed harmlessly overhead as Thunderbolt found cover behind the raised earth, entangled vegetation of a Norman hedgerow. Rollins, load armor piercing. Aim for the lower hull when we clear the hedgerow. The rest of the company engaged the German tanks from different angles, applying the iron triangle doctrine Jack had developed. Outgunned individually, the Shermans used their superior mobility and coordination to flank the heavier German tanks. One by one, the Panzers began to fall. A Sherman from 2nd Platoon brewed up in a spectacular fireball, its ammunition detonating. Another lost a track but continued firing from its immobile position. Wilson, advance to that stone wall. Doc, load high explosive. Target the infantry behind that Panzer. Thunderbolt moved forward in short bursts, firing and relocating before the German gunners could get a solid fix on them. Jack coordinated the company's movements by radio, directing tanks to support each other and cover vulnerable flanks. The battle raged for nearly an hour. When dawn finally broke, 3 German panzers lay burning on the outskirts of St. Gabriel. American infantry was mopping up isolated pockets of resistance within the village itself. Jack's company had lost 2 more tanks, bringing their total losses since landing to 8 of the original 15. But they had stopped the German counterattack cold, preventing a potentially devastating strike at the fragile supply lines from the beaches. As Thunderbolt's engine finally surrendered, black smoke pouring from the exhausted power plant, Colonel Harrison's jeep skidded to a halt beside them. "Montgomery!" Harrison bellowed. "You disobeyed direct orders." Jack climbed warily from the turret, his face blackened with cordite and sweat. "Yes, sir." Harrison stared at him for a long moment, then at the burning German tanks. "Intelligence completely missed their maneuver. If you hadn't brought your company back—" He shook his head. "How did you know?" "My father wrote about German tactics in North Africa. They like to feint toward one objective while striking another. When I saw the report they were heading for Bayeux, it didn't make tactical sense." Harrison grunted. "Your father would be proud." He surveyed the battlefield. "Your Thunderbolt looks finished." "Engine's gone, sir. We've been running on borrowed time since that Panzerfaust hit." "Well, we've captured an intact Panzer IV. Would be ashamed to send it back to intelligence when we need every tank we can get." Harrison smiled slightly. "Think your crew could adapt?" Jack looked at Thunderbolt, the faithful machine that had carried them through the invasion and their first day of combat. The white Thunderbolt name on the gun barrel was now barely visible beneath layers of soot and dirt. "We'll paint Thunderbolt 2 on the Panzer, sir. German gun with American attitude." "Good man." Harrison clapped him on the shoulder. "We're pushing inland tomorrow. The Krauts are regrouping at Cannes. It'll be the real test." That night, Jack rode to Elizabeth by flashlight inside the captured Panzer. The German tank was larger inside than the Sherman, with better optics and a more powerful gun, but it felt alien, wrong somehow, like wearing another man's clothes. "My darling Elizabeth," he wrote, "today I faced a choice between following orders and following my instincts. I chose the latter, risking court-martial, but saving many lives in the process. I find myself thinking of father and grandfather, wondering if they faced similar moments of decision. War clarifies things, strips away pretense. I now understand why they chose as they did, why the call of duty can outweigh even the deepest personal desires. This doesn't ease the pain of our loss or excuse my absence when you needed me most. But perhaps it helps explain why men like my father, my grandfather, and now me find ourselves drawn to the sound of guns." He paused, listening to the distant artillery that never fully ceased, day or night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. The path to Berlin would be long and costly. "I carry you with me always," he continued. "When this war is over, I promise we will have that family we dreamed of. Until then, know that everything I do here, every risk I take and sacrifice I make, is so that our children will never have to do the same. All my love, Jack." Outside, the crew had built a small fire to heat their rations. Jack joined them, accepting a tin cup of bitter coffee from Martinez. "Captain," Rollins said quietly, "that was some fancy thinking today, figuring out the German move." "Just applied what I have studied. The Germans are predictable in their unpredictability." "Well, we're alive because of it," Doc Peterson added. "Though I'm not sure about operating a Kraut tank. All the labels are in German." Jack smiled. "We'll figure it out together. That's what makes us different from them. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome." Wilson raised his cup in a toast. "To Thunderbolt. May her successor be just as lucky." "It's not about luck," Jack corrected gently. "It's about skill, training, and trust. Each of you doing your job so all of us can go home." The men nodded solemnly, the reality of their losses tempering any celebration. 8 tanks gone, their crews either dead or wounded. And this was just the first day of what could be a very long campaign. Jack looked up at the stars, thinking of Elizabeth back in Philadelphia, of the child they had lost, of the future still uncertain. Tomorrow they would move out again, pushing deeper into France, closer to Germany with each mile. The panzer divisions waited at Cannes, their heavy Tigers and Panthers ready to challenge the advancing Allied armor. But tonight they had won, against the odds, against direct orders. They had made the right choice and saved countless lives. Jack's grandfather would have called it the Montgomery instinct. His father would have called it duty. Jack simply called it necessary. As the fire burned low, Jack retired to the captured Panzer that would be their new home. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new challenges. But for now, in the quiet darkness of the Norman countryside, Captain James Iron Jack Montgomery allowed himself a moment of peace. Not the peace of safety or certainty, but the peace that comes from knowing you've done what needed to be done, regardless of the cost. The road to St. Lo stretched before them like a gauntlet. Fields of golden wheat flanked the narrow Norman road, deceptively peaceful under the summer sun. But Captain James Montgomery knew better. Those picturesque hedgerows concealed German machine gun nests, anti-tank positions, and snipers. Every yard would be contested. Thunderbolt II led to the column, the captured Panzer IV now painted in American colors with a white star emblazoned on its turret. The name was stenciled on the long 75mm gun barrel, a continuation of the legacy that had begun on the beaches. Jack stood in the commander's hatch, binoculars scanning the terrain ahead. 2 weeks had passed since D-Day. The beachhead was secure, but the crucial objective of St. Lo, a transportation hub vital to the Allied advance, remained in German hands. "Movement in the hedgerow, 2 o'clock," Sergeant Rollins called from the gunner's position. Jack focused his binoculars. "Infantry, ours. Baker Company, 29th Infantry." He dropped down into the turret, closing the hatch as a light rain began to fall. Inside, the German tank still felt foreign, the controls and instruments marked in Gothic script. But they had adapted quickly, discovering the superior optical sights and thicker armor were worth the adjustment. "All Thunderbolt elements maintain interval. We'll reach the infantry position in 2 minutes. Prepare to provide covering fire." The column of tanks, now replenished to 12 after receiving replacements, rumbled forward. Jack's company had been tasked with supporting the 29th Infantry Division's push towards St. Lo, breaking through the hedgerow country that had stalled the Allied advance. At the forward infantry position, Jack met with Captain Lewis of Baker Company, a haggard man with 3 days' stubble and bloodshot eyes. "Glad to see armor," Lewis said, studying a map spread on the hood of his Jeep. "We've been pinned down here for 2 days. Krauts have their 88s set up on that ridge." He pointed to a line of high ground a mile distant. "Every time we try to advance, they hammer us." Jack studied the terrain. The 88 Magnum gun was the most feared German weapon among tankers, capable of penetrating a Sherman's armor at extreme ranges. His father had died to one of those guns in North Africa. "Direct assault would be suicide," Jack mused. "We need to flank them." Lewis shook his head. "No good. We tried sending a patrol around the east flank last night. Never came back. They've got the whole ridge covered." Jack traced the contours on the map. "What about this draw here? Looks like it provides cover most of the way." "That's what our patrol thought too, but there's a German observation post in that church spire. Nothing moves in that draw without them seeing it." Jack considered the problem. Frontal assault meant heavy casualties. Flanking movement would be spotted. They needed a third option. "What if we move at night? No moon tonight." Lewis looked skeptical. "Moving armor at night through hedgerow country? You'll lose half your tanks to ditches and the other half will give away their position the moment they start up." Jack smiled. "Not if we're already in position before dark. I have an idea." That afternoon, Jack briefed his tank commanders on the plan. 3 Shermans would create a diversion at dusk, drawing German attention to the eastern flank. Meanwhile, Jack would lead the main force of 9 tanks, including Thunderbolt II, into the draw under the last light of day. They would advance to within striking distance of the German position, then shut down and wait. "At exactly 0200, we start up and assault the ridge from below. The infantry will follow close behind us. With luck, we'll be on top of them before they can bring those 88s to bear." "And if we're spotted?" Lieutenant Parker, his second-in-command, asked. "Then we implement the contingency plan immediately. Full speed, maximum firepower. No hesitation." As dusk fell, the operation began. The 3 diversion tanks moved east, deliberately making noise and occasionally firing into the German lines. German artillery responded predictably, focusing on the perceived threat. Jack led Thunderbolt II and the remaining tanks into the draw. The failing light made navigation treacherous. One Sherman slid into a ditch, becoming hopelessly stuck. Another threw a track trying to navigate a particularly steep section. "Wilson, hold here," Jack ordered his driver. "This is close enough." The tanks spread out in the draw, maintaining enough distance to avoid being taken out by a single artillery barrage. Crews performed final maintenance checks, then settled in for the long wait. Inside Thunderbolt II, the atmosphere was tense. Doc Peterson passed around K rations, which they ate cold to avoid any telltale smoke from heating. Hell of a plan, Captain, Martinez commented, chewing on a stale chocolate bar. Either brilliance or madness. Sometimes they're the same thing, Jack replied. My grandfather did something similar at Saint Mihiel, got his entire company behind German lines before they knew what hit them. The original Iron Montgomery, Rollins said with a nod. Hope we live up to the name. Jack checked his watch, 2130 hours. Still more than 4 hours to wait. He opened the small compartment where he kept Elizabeth's letters, pulling out the most recent one that had miraculously caught up with him 2 days ago. Dear Jack, it read, the doctors say I'm finally recovering my strength. Mother hovers constantly, convinced I'll collapse if left alone for more than 5 minutes. Father reads every newspaper article about the invasion, looking for any mention of the 2nd Armored. I tell him you're too busy fighting to become famous. I dream of you every night. Sometimes you're just sitting in our kitchen in West Point, drinking coffee and reading the paper as if you never left. Other times you're in that metal coffin, surrounded by fire and noise. I wake screaming from those dreams. Come back to me, Jack. However long it takes, whatever you have to do over there, just come back. All my love, Elizabeth. He folded the letter carefully and returned it to its place. Elizabeth was right to worry. Every day in Normandy had been a brutal education in survival. His company had seen nearly 200% casualties in terms of tanks, though many crews had survived to receive replacement vehicles. The human cost was higher than anyone had predicted. Captain, Wilson whispered from the driver's seat, listen. Jack strained his ears. In the distance, the distinctive rumble of heavy engines echoed through the night. Not the American Shermans or the lighter German Panzer IVs. Something bigger. Tigers, Rollins muttered. Has to be. The Tiger was the most formidable tank in the German arsenal. Its 88mm gun identical to the dreaded anti-tank guns that had been plaguing them. Its frontal armor was nearly impenetrable to the Sherman's 75mm gun. How many? Jack asked. Hard to tell. Engine noise suggests at least 3, maybe 4. Jack's mind raced. Tigers would completely alter the equation. Their plan had accounted for the fixed 88mm positions, but not mobile ones with heavy armor. Change of plans, he decided. We move now. If those Tigers get established on that ridge, we'll never take it. Sir, we're still outnumbered, Parker protested over the radio. Quality over quantity, Lieutenant. They won't expect us. We still have surprise, and we have one advantage they don't. What's that, sir? Jack smiled grimly. We're desperate. The order went out. Start engines, advance immediately. The 7 remaining tanks in the draw rumbled to life. Jack directed them into a wedge formation. Thunderbolt 2 at the point. Wilson, maximum speed. Don't stop for anything. Martinez, watch for infantry with Panzerfausts. Rollins, target the nearest Tiger sticks first. Immobilize it. Thunderbolt 2 surged forward, the captured German engine roaring as Wilson pushed it to its limits. They broke from the draw onto the open slope of the ridge, headlights off, navigating by the faint ambient light. The German reaction was slow, confused. Flares suddenly illuminated the night sky, turning darkness to ghostly day. A machine gun opened up, tracers streaming harmlessly over the advancing tanks. Target identified, Rollins called. Tiger at 12 o'clock, 800 yards. Jack spotted it through his periscope. The massive German tank sat hull down at the crest of the ridge, its long 80mm gun traversing toward them. Fire! Thunderbolt 2's gun roared, the muzzle flash momentarily blinding in the darkness. The shell struck the Tiger's frontal armor and ricocheted away without penetrating. No effect, Rollins reported, already reloading. Aiming for the track. The Tiger fired. Its shell passed so close to Thunderbolt 2 that Jack felt the pressure wave. Behind them, one of the Shermans erupted in flames, hit squarely in the ammunition storage. Wilson, zigzag pattern, close the distance. The captured Panzer IV accelerated up the slope, changing direction unpredictably. 2 more Tigers appeared on the ridge, their commanders apparently deciding that whatever was happening required their full complement. Jack keyed his radio. All tanks, focus fire on the center Tiger. Aim for tracks and vision ports. The American tanks concentrated their fire on a single target, a dozen shells impacting in rapid succession. Most bounced off harmlessly, but one found a weak point where the turret met the hull. The Tiger began to burn. One down, Jack called encouragingly. Shift fire left. The remaining Tigers, now alerted to the threat, brought their guns to bear with deadly German efficiency. A second Sherman brewed up, then a third. The night was illuminated by burning tanks, American and German alike. Rollins scored a hit on a Tiger's track, immobilizing it but leaving its gun operational. The crippled behemoth swung its turret toward Thunderbolt II. "Wilson, hard right," Jack ordered. The driver reacted instantly, throwing the tank into a tight turn that narrowly avoided the Tiger's shell. They were close enough now that Jack could see the German commander in his open hatch, shouting orders to his crew. "Martinez, target the commander." The bow machine gun chattered, sending the German commander ducking back into his turret. That momentary distraction allowed another Sherman to land a shot on the Tiger's side armor from an oblique angle, finding a vulnerability. The German tank shuddered as the shell penetrated, then secondary explosions tore it apart from within. "Two down," Jack announced. "One to go." But the third Tiger was retreating, backing down the far side of the ridge, its frontal armor still facing the attacking Americans. 3 more Shermans had been knocked out, leaving only Thunderbolt II and 2 others operational. "Sir, infantry reports the 88 positions are abandoned," Parker reported. "The crews are pulling out." Jack made a split-second decision. "Let the Tiger go. Secure the ridge. That was our objective." The remaining tanks crested the ridge, machine guns sweeping the abandoned German positions. True to Parker's report, the feared 88mm guns stood silent, their crews having fled in the confusion of the night battle. By dawn, the ridge was firmly in American hands. The infantry moved up, establishing defensive positions against the counterattack that would inevitably come. Jack surveyed the battlefield from the turret of Thunderbolt II. 5 Shermans burned on the slopes, their crews either dead or wounded. 2 Tigers lay destroyed, smoking hulks of German engineering. Colonel Harrison arrived as the sun cleared the horizon, his jeep bouncing over the rutted terrain. "Montgomery, you magnificent bastard," he said, climbing the ridge on foot. "Division expected this to take 3 days and a full regiment. We had an opportunity, sir. Those Tigers arrived just as we were preparing our planned assault. It was now or never." Harrison studied the burning German tanks. "First time I've seen Tigers knocked out by Shermans. How'd you manage it?" "Surprise, sir, and concentration of fire, 1 target at a time." Jack didn't mention that his own tank was a captured Panzer IV, technically better armed than the Shermans. "Well, whatever you did, it worked. This ridge gives us direct observation all the way to St. Lo." Harrison unfolded a map. "Krauts are falling back to defensive positions around the city itself. We'll be moving out again tomorrow." "My company's down to 3 operational tanks, sir. Replacements are arriving this afternoon. You'll be back up to strength." Harrison hesitated. "There's something else. General Patton observed your action from the CP. He was impressed." Jack raised an eyebrow. General George Patton was a legend, the most aggressive and controversial American commander in the European theater. His opinion carried enormous weight. "The general wants to see you," Harrison continued. "He's considering your company for the spearhead when his Third Army becomes operational." "Spearhead for Patton?" Jack couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. "That would be an honor, sir." "And a death sentence," Harrison added bluntly. "Patton drives men hard, but if anyone can survive it, it's you." He clapped Jack on the shoulder. "Get some rest. The general will expect to see you at 1400 hours." As Harrison departed, Jack's crew emerged from the tank, stretching cramped muscles after the long night. "Heard the news, Captain," Rollins said. "Patton himself." "Nothing's decided yet," Jack cautioned. "And we've got a long way to go before St. Lo, let alone Germany." They walked among the wrecked German equipment, taking stock of what might be salvageable. The 88mm guns were intact, though their sights had been damaged by the retreating crews. "Captain Montgomery," called a voice. A group of soldiers approached, escorting a German officer in a tattered uniform. "Found this one hiding in a drainage ditch. Says he knows you, sir." Jack studied the prisoner, recognition dawning slowly. "Schneider? Kurt Schneider." The German officer straightened. "Hello, James. It has been a long time." Kurt Schneider had been an exchange student at West Point 4 years earlier, part of a program that had ended abruptly when war in Europe became inevitable. He had been Jack's roommate for a semester, a brilliant tactician with an encyclopedic knowledge of military history. "Search him and stand back," Jack ordered the infantry escorts. When they had moved a discreet distance away, he spoke quietly. "I never expected to find you here, Kurt." "Nor I you," the German replied in excellent English. "Though I am not surprised you command tanks. You always spoke of following your father's path. You're a long way from the Eastern Front. Last I heard, that's where most of the Wehrmacht's best were stationed." Kurt's expression darkened. I served 2 years in Russia. My unit was transferred west when the invasion became imminent. He glanced at the destroyed Tigers. Those were from my company. I commanded the one that escaped. Jack felt a chill. They had been firing at each other just hours ago, trying to kill each other without knowing who sat in the opposing turret. Your attack was brilliant, Kirk continued. Completely unexpected. Classic Montgomery. You remembered my grandfather's tactics? Of course. You spoke of him often. I studied his approach at Saint-Mihiel, used it myself at Kursk, though with less success. Jack signaled for the infantry to bring Kurt some water. The German drank gratefully. What happens now, James? Now you go to a POW camp until this is over. Kurt nodded resignedly. Better than the Russians, at least. He lowered his voice. James, I should not tell you this, but there is a full panzer regiment moving into position north of Saint-Lô. Tiger Tutus, not the models you face today. Much heavier armor, better gun. Jack studied his former roommate's face, searching for deception. Why tell me this? Because enough have died, and because once we were friends. Kurt glanced at the departing Colonel Harrison. Your commander moves too quickly. He will send you directly into their path. I need more than that, Kurt. Exact positions, numbers, supporting units. Kurt hesitated, the conflict evident on his face. Then he knelt, drawing in the dirt with his finger. They are here, behind this ridge. 17 Tiger IIs plus supporting infantry with Panzerfausts. They know your likely approach routes. They are waiting for you. Jack memorized the improvised map. If Kurt was telling the truth, the planned American advance would run straight into a deadly ambush, with catastrophic losses. Why should I believe you? Kurt stood, brushing dirt from his hands. Because we both know how this war ends, James. Germany cannot win. Too many fronts, too few resources. The most I can hope for now is to survive, perhaps see my family again someday. The infantry returned to escort Kurt to the prisoner collection point. As they led him away, he turned back. One more thing, James. The commander of the Tiger Regiment is Oberst Wilhelm Bauer. He served with Rommel in Africa. He may have been at the battle where your father died. Jack felt his blood run cold. How could you know that? Because he speaks of it. An American tank company destroyed to the last vehicle. He claims personal credit. It haunts him still, I think. With that final revelation, Kurt was led away. Jack stood alone on the ridge, staring towards Saint-Lô, invisible beyond the rolling Norman countryside. If Kurt was telling the truth, a ghost from his father's past awaited them, commanding the most powerful tanks in the German arsenal. And if he was lying, feeding false intelligence to delay the American advance, Jack made his decision. He would report Kurt's information to Colonel Harrison and General Patton. Let them decide whether to trust it, but he would also prepare his company for the worst-case scenario. General George Patton was exactly as Jack had imagined him. Ramrod straight, ivory-handled pistols at his hips, his face weathered by years in the field. They met in a commandeered French chateau serving as Third Army's advance headquarters. Captain Montgomery, Patton said, inspecting Jack with piercing eyes. Harrison tells me you're the best tank commander in the 2nd Armored. I have good men, sir. Humility has its place, Captain, but not in my presence. I want officers who know their worth. Patton moved to a large map table. Your night attack on those Tigers. Explain your thinking. Jack outlined his reasoning, his assessment of the threat, and his decision to attack immediately rather than wait for the planned assault. Patton nodded approvingly. Initiative, that's what wins wars, not waiting for perfect conditions or overwhelming force. He jabbed a finger at the map. Saint-Lô is the key to breaking out of this damn hedgerow country. Once it falls, we can deploy armor properly, in mass. Sir, I've received intelligence about German forces north of Saint-Lô that may affect the planned approach. Jack relayed Kurt's information, including the presence of Tiger IIs and their commander's connection to his father's death in North Africa. Patton absorbed this silently, then fixed Jack with a penetrating stare. You trust this German? We were acquaintance before the war. He was an exchange student at West Point. That doesn't answer my question, Captain. Do you trust him? Jack considered carefully. I believe he thinks the war is lost and sees no point in further bloodshed. Whether that translates to accurate intelligence, I can't say with certainty. Patton grunted. At least you're honest about it. He studied the map. If he's telling the truth, our planned approach is compromised. If he's lying, we lose momentum by changing plans. He thought for a moment, then smiled thinly. So we'll do both. Sir, your company will advance as planned, appearing to fall for the ambush. But you'll be bait, not victims. Meanwhile, I'll send the 3rd Armored around this valley here, flanking the German position. When they're engaged with you, we hit them from behind. Jack studied the map. It was a sound plan, assuming the German positions were as Kurt had described. But being the bait meant his company would face the full fury of those Tiger IIs, at least initially. One more thing, Captain. This German officer claimed their commander might have been involved in your father's death. Yes, sir. Oberst Wilhelm Bauer, supposedly served under Rommel in North Africa. Patton's eyes narrowed. I know of Bauer, skilled tactician, utterly devoted to Hitler. He fixed Jack with a hard stare. This doesn't become personal, Captain. Your mission is to fix those Tigers in position for the flanking attack, not to settle family scores. Am I clear? Perfectly clear, sir. Good. Because after this operation, I want your company transferred to 3rd Army's spearhead. Men who take initiative are rare. I collect them like fine art. The meeting concluded. Jack returned to his company to prepare for the coming battle. The replacement tanks had arrived, bringing them back up to 12 Shermans, plus his own Panzer IV. He briefed his tank commanders on the plan, emphasizing the need to appear vulnerable while actually implementing carefully planned defensive measures. We'll advance in standard column formation, making it look like we're walking right into their trap. But each tank will have a pre-selected fallback position. When they open fire, we scatter to defensive positions, then hold them in place until 3rd Armored hits their flank. Lieutenant Parker looked skeptical. Those Tiger IIs can penetrate our armor at over 2,000 yards. We won't last long in the open. We'll use smoke and terrain features for cover. Every second we keep them occupied is critical for the flanking force. Jack met each commander's eyes in turn. I won't lie to you, this is high risk, but it's also high reward. Break this German force, and the road to St. Lo is open. That night, Jack wrote to Elizabeth, sensing this might be his last opportunity for some time. My dearest Elizabeth, tomorrow we advance towards St. Lo. The fighting has been fierce, the loss is heavy, but we are pushing forward, yard by yard, mile by mile. I think often of you, of the life we'll build together when this is over. It sustains me through the darkest moments. The men call me iron now, like my grandfather. They don't see the doubt, the fear that grips me before each engagement. I wear the mask of certainty because they need it. But in truth, I am terrified of failing them, of making the mistake that costs lives. Perhaps this is what my father felt too, in those final days in Africa. Not fear of death, but fear of responsibility. I love you more than I can express. Whatever happens, know that every decision I make is to ensure I return to you, your Jack. Dawn broke cold and misty over the Norman countryside. Jack's company moved out at first light, advancing toward the position Kurt had indicated on his crude map. The column of tanks moved deliberately, maintaining perfect interval, presenting the appearance of a routine advance. Inside Thunderbolt 2, the atmosphere was tense. Doc Peterson loaded shells in mechanical silence. Wilson focused on maintaining their position in the column. Rawlins continuously scanned through his gunner's sight. Martinez fingered the trigger of his bow machine gun nervously. 1 mile to the German position, Jack announced. Everyone stay sharp. Remember, when they open fire, we implement Scatter Plan Alpha immediately. The terrain ahead was rolling farmland, dotted with small woods and the ubiquitous hedgerows. Perfect ambush country. Jack studied the ridgeline through his binoculars, searching for any sign of the concealed Tigers. Movement 10 o'clock, Martinez reported. Infantry, I think. Jack swiveled his periscope. German troops were visible briefly, moving between positions along the ridge. So Kurt's information was at least partially correct. The question was whether the Tiger IIs were there as well. All tanks maintain course and speed. Gunners, load armor piercing, prepare to scatter on my command. They continued forward, now just half a mile from the ridge. The silence was unnerving. No artillery, no machine gun fire, not even reconnaissance probes. Either the Germans were exercising incredible fire discipline, or they weren't there at all. Sir, Rollins said quietly, something doesn't feel right. Jack had the same sense. The neck-prickling intuition that had kept him alive so far was screaming warnings. But the plan required them to continue, to draw the Germans into revealing their positions. 400 yards, he announced. Stand by to... The world exploded. Not from the ridge ahead, but from the tree line to their right. The distinctive 88mm crack of Tiger guns, followed by the scream of shells and thunderous impacts. 3 Shermans erupted in flames almost simultaneously. Ambush right! Scatter, scatter, scatter! Thunderbolt 2 lurched as Wilson threw it into a hard turn, seeking the nearest cover. The rest of the company broke formation, each tank racing for its pre-designated position. More shells screamed in, claiming 2 more Shermans before they could reach safety. Jack swung his periscope toward the tree line. The massive shapes of Tiger II tanks were visible now, moving out of their perfect concealment. Not on the ridges Kurt had indicated, but in the woods to the right. Either Kurt had lied or the Germans had changed positions after his capture. "Count 8 Tigers," Rawlins reported grimly, moving to engage. Half his company gone in the first volley, and the flanking force from 3rd Armored was heading for the wrong position. They were alone against the most powerful tanks in the German arsenal. "Wilson, get us behind that stone farmhouse. Martinez, call battalion. Tell them the Tigers are at grid reference Baker 7, not Delta 3 as expected. The flanking force needs to redirect immediately." Thunderbolt 2 raced for the cover of the sturdy Norman farmhouse, its stone walls offering at least partial protection. As they slid into position, Jack saw 3 more of his Shermans had reached defensive positions in a sunken lane. The remaining tank was hit as it sought cover, its turret blown completely off by the powerful German gun. "6 tanks lost," Jack muttered. 6 left. "Radio's out, sir," Martinez reported. "Direct hit on the antenna base," Jack cursed. Without radio, they couldn't alert the flanking force to the Germans' true position. They were on their own. "Rawlins, can you get a shot from here?" The gunner swiveled the turret, peering through his sight. "Negative, angle's wrong. Need to move forward about 10 yards. "That'll expose our flank," Wilson warned. "No choice. If we don't start picking them off, they'll roll right over us." Jack keyed the intercom. "Wilson, on my command, move forward 10 yards, then hard left. Rawlins, be ready for a snapshot. Doc, load armor piercing." "Ready," the crew replied in unison. "Execute." Thunderbolt 2 surged forward, clearing the protection of the farmhouse. A Tiger shell passed overhead, missing by inches. Wilson threw the tank into a hard left turn, presenting their strongest frontal armor to the enemy. Rawlins acquired his target instantly, the practiced movements of countless drills paying off. "On the way!" The gun roared, the shell streaking toward the nearest Tiger II. It struck the massive German tank at the junction of turret and hull, a vulnerable point even in the formidable design. The Tiger shuddered, smoke pouring from the hit. "Got him!" Rawlins exulted, loading again. But the remaining Tigers had spotted them. 3 massive turrets swung in their direction, the long 88mm guns tracking with mechanical precision. "Back to cover," Jack ordered. "Now!" Wilson reversed furiously, but they were fully exposed for critical seconds. A shell struck Thunderbolt 2's left track, shearing it completely off. The tank slewed sideways, immobilized. "We're hit! Track destroyed!" Jack assessed their situation in seconds. Immobile but still able to fight. Partial cover from the farmhouse. Gun operational. "We're a pillbox now," he announced grimly. "Rawlins, maintain fire. Wilson, shut down the engine before it catches fire. Martinez, watch for infantry trying to flank us." The battle devolved into a desperate holding action. The American tanks in the sunken lane provided covering fire, preventing the Tigers from rushing Thunderbolt 2's position. Jack's crew scored another hit on a Tiger, immobilizing it like they were, creating a static gun duel between the 2 crippled behemoths. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes felt like hours as shells screamed back and forth across the Norman farmland. The stone farmhouse gradually disintegrated under repeated impacts, chunks of ancient masonry raining down on Thunderbolt 2's hull. "Running low on ammunition," Doc Peterson reported. 4 armor-piercing rounds left. "Make them count," Jack replied. "Aim for their optics and gun mantlets. If we can't penetrate their armor, we'll blind them." Rawlins scored a direct hit on a Tiger's gunner sight, temporarily blinding it. Another shell damaged the gun recoil system of a second Tiger, causing it to withdraw behind the tree line for repairs. But the remaining German tanks pressed their advantage, gradually encircling the American position. Without radio contact, Jack couldn't know if the flanking force had been alerted to the changed situation or if help was coming at all. "Sir," Martinez called urgently, "infantry approaching from the east. At least a platoon with Panzerfausts." German infantry with anti-tank weapons represented a deadly threat to their immobilized tank. A single hit from a Panzerfaust could penetrate their armor, turning Thunderbolt 2 into a funeral pyre. "Doc, load high explosive. Martinez, traverse right and stand by." Jack switched to the external loudspeaker. Attention in the sunken lane. German infantry approaching from the east with anti-tank weapons. Engage immediately. The Shermans in the lane redirected their machine gun fire, catching the advancing German troops in a deadly crossfire. Bodies fell among the wheat, but more pressed forward, using every fold in the ground for cover. There, Martinez shouted. Panzerfaust team at 2 o'clock. I see them, Rawlins confirmed, swinging the turret. Firing now. The high explosive shell detonated among the German anti-tank team, the blast throwing bodies into the air. But more teams were visible, working their way closer under covering fire from their comrades. Last AP round, Doc reported grimly. Jack made a quick decision. Load it. Target the lead Tiger, the one with the command pennant. Rawlins, wait for a perfect shot. Through his periscope, Jack studied the German tank commander. The man stood confidently in his open turret, directing the encirclement with the precision of a chess master. Jack had a sudden, visceral certainty. This was Oberst Bauer, the man who might have killed his father. Target acquired, Rawlins said softly. Range 800 yards, adjusting for wind drift. Take the shot when ready. Rawlins exhaled slowly, his body perfectly still. His finger tightened on the trigger. On the way. The final armor-piercing round left the barrel with a deafening roar. Jack tracked its path through his periscope, watching as it covered the distance to the German command tank in less than a second. It struck the Tiger squarely on the turret ring, the weakest point in the otherwise impenetrable frontal armor. The German tank shuddered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then flames erupted from the open commander's hatch, followed by secondary explosions as ammunition began to cook off inside. Direct hit, Jack exclaimed. Command tank destroyed. Without their commander, the German attack faltered momentarily. The infantry went to ground, and the remaining Tigers paused their advance. Then, from the northeast, a new sound joined the battle. The unmistakable rumble of Sherman engines at full throttle. Dozens of them. The flanking force, Martinez shouted. They made it! The tanks of 3rd Armored Division crashed into the German right flank, catching them in a perfect hammer and anvil position. Caught between Jack's dug-in survivors and the fresh American attack, the German force began a fighting withdrawal. By late afternoon, it was over. The field was littered with burning tanks, American and German alike. Of Jack's original 13 tanks, only 4 remained operational. Thunderbolt II sat immobile but intact, its crew exhausted but alive. General Patton arrived personally to survey the battlefield, accompanied by Colonel Harrison and a full security detail. Magnificent, Patton declared, standing beside the crippled Thunderbolt II. Absolutely magnificent. You held them here exactly as planned. Jack, his face blackened with cordite and sweat, climbed wearily from the turret. Not exactly as planned, sir. They weren't where we expected. The intelligence was wrong, Harrison acknowledged, or deliberately misleading. Jack thought of Kurt Schneider, wondering if his former roommate had betrayed him, or if the Germans had simply changed positions after his capture. He would probably never know. We counted 5 Tiger IIs destroyed, Patton continued, including Oberst Bauer's command tank. That was your shot, I understand? My gunner's shot, sir. Sergeant Rawlins is the best in the division. Bauer was one of their top panzer commanders. Removing him will disrupt their entire defensive structure around St. Lo. Patton studied Jack with renewed interest. Harrison tells me there might have been a personal connection. Something about North Africa? Jack nodded slowly. We believe Bauer may have commanded the unit that killed my father in '42. Patton's eyes gleamed. Then today you've not only served your country, you've balanced the scales of justice. He clapped Jack on the shoulder. Your company will be refitted immediately. I want you ready to move with 3rd Army's spearhead within 48 hours. My men need rest, sir. They'll rest when the war is over, Captain. Or when they're dead. Patton's voice brooked no argument. The breakout from Normandy is about to begin. I mean to be in Paris within a month, and you're coming with me. As Patton departed, Jack's crew emerged from Thunderbolt II. They looked as exhausted as he felt, their uniforms stained with sweat and oil, their faces haggard from the strain of combat. Did I hear right? Rawlins asked. We're joining Patton's spearhead? Jack nodded. As soon as we get replacement tanks and crews. Jesus, Wilson muttered. Out of the frying pan. Into the fire, Jack finished. But that's where we belong, isn't it? We're Thunderbolt. The crew managed tired smiles at that. Their identity had become inseparable from the tank they crewed, even though the original Sherman was long gone and their current Panzer IV was too damaged to continue. What about Schneider? Martinez asked. Was he playing us? Jack sighed. I don't know. Maybe the Germans moved after he was captured. Maybe he lied to protect his men. Maybe it was a calculated deception approved by his superiors. Or maybe he told the truth as he knew it, Doc Peterson suggested. Intelligence is never perfect. We know that better than most. Jack considered this. In the confusion of battle, with units constantly shifting positions and communications often disrupted, it was entirely possible Kurt had reported the positions accurately as he knew them. I choose to believe he was honest, Jack decided. We were friends once. That has to count for something, even in war. Recovery vehicles arrived to tow Thunderbolt II back to the maintenance depot. Jack watched as his faithful tank was winched onto a trailer, its battle scars evident in the fading light. Soon they would have a new tank, new challenges, new battles under Patton's aggressive leadership. "Captain," a runner called, approaching with an envelope. "Message from Division HQ." Jack opened it, reading quickly. "Well, I'll be damned." "What is it, sir?" Rollins asked. "Elizabeth. She's coming to England as part of a Red Cross contingent." Jack couldn't keep the wonder from his voice. "She'll be at a field hospital near London." "That's wonderful news, sir," Doc said sincerely. "When do you see her?" Jack's smile faded slightly. "That's the catch. We're moving out with Patton in 48 hours. No leave approved until the breakout is complete." The crew exchanged glances, understanding the cruel timing, so close, yet still separated by duty and circumstance. "We'll get you there, sir," Rollins said firmly. "Break through fast enough, and maybe we'll earn you that leave." Jack appreciated the sentiment, though he knew it was unlikely. Patton drove his men relentlessly, with little concern for personal matters. The advance would continue until they reached Germany or were stopped by force. 2 days later, the reorganized company prepared to move out. Jack had been assigned a new Sherman, the latest M4A3E8 model with a more powerful 76mm gun. It was superior to their previous tanks in almost every way, but Jack found himself missing the quirks and character of Thunderbolt II, which had served them so well despite its German origins. The new tank was christened Thunderbolt III, the name painted on its gun barrel alongside the now famous lightning fist emblem. Jack's original crew remained intact, a rarity given the casualty rates. They had become a family, bound by shared danger and unwavering trust. As they prepared to join Patton's spearhead for the breakout from Normandy, Jack received one final unexpected visitor, a military police jeep escorting a familiar figure. "Captain Montgomery," Kurt Schneider said, still in his tattered German uniform. "They told me you were moving out." Jack dismissed the MP escort with a nod. "Kurt, I didn't expect to see you again. They are transferring us to England tomorrow. Before I left, I wanted to explain. The Tigers weren't where you said they would be." Kurt nodded gravely. "After my capture, Oberstbauer must have changed positions. He was always paranoid about security breaches." He studied Jack's face. "You don't believe me." Jack considered carefully before answering. "I believe you told me what you knew. Whether it was accurate is another question. We were friends once, James. I would not deliberately send you to your death. We're on opposite sides of a war, Kurt. Friendship has its limits." Kurt smiled sadly. "Yes, I suppose it does. I heard you killed Bauer yourself." "My gunner did," clean shot to the turret ring. "He was a difficult man, but a brilliant tactician, like your father, from what you told me." Jack felt a complex surge of emotions at the comparison. Did Bauer really engage my father's company in North Africa? He spoke of it often, a textbook ambush, he called it, but it haunted him, the completeness of the destruction. Kurt met Jack's eyes directly. "He would have respected you, I think." Jack wasn't sure how to feel about that. Respect from the man who killed his father seemed a hollow consolation. But war created such contradictions, such moral complexities. "What will you do after the war, Kurt?" Jack asked, surprising himself with the question. "If Germany loses? Try to rebuild, I suppose. Find what remains of my family." Kurt looked toward the east, where the distant thunder of artillery marked the front line. "And you? Go home. Teach, maybe. Start a family with Elizabeth." "Ah, yes, you're Elizabeth." Kurt smiled genuinely. "You spoke of her often at West Point. I hope you find happiness together." A motor pool sergeant approached, signaling that the column was preparing to move out. "It seems this is goodbye," Kurt said, extending his hand. Jack hesitated only briefly before shaking it. "Good luck, Kurt. I hope you make it home." "And you, James. May we meet again in better times." As Kurt was escorted back to the MP Jeep, Jack climbed into Thunderbolt III's turret. The crew was already at their stations, the engine idling smoothly. "Who was that, sir?" Martinez asked. "Someone from another life," Jack replied, "before all this." The attack order came down the line. Patton's spearhead was moving out. Jack sealed his hatch as the column of tanks began to roll forward, leaving the hedgerow country behind at last. Ahead lay open ground, the perfect terrain for armored warfare, and beyond that, the heart of occupied France. All Thunderbolt elements, Jack broadcast to his reconstituted company, maintain interval, watch for anti-tank positions. Remember your training and trust your teammates. We're the tip of the spear now. As they rolled forward into the gathering dusk, Jack found himself thinking of Elizabeth, so close yet still unreachable, of his father whose death had been avenged, though the hollow victory brought little peace, of Kurt Schneider, once a friend, now an enemy, yet still somehow connected by bonds that transcended the conflict. The war had changed them all, marked them in ways that would never fully heal, but it had also forged them, tempering them like steel and fire until they emerged stronger, more resilient. Whatever lay ahead, Jack knew his crew would face it together, bound by the shared crucible of combat. The thunder of engines filled the night as hundreds of tanks rolled forward, the might of American industry and resolve made manifest in steel and fire. Operation Cobra had begun. The breakout from Normandy was underway. And Captain James "Iron Jack" Montgomery, inheritor of a proud family tradition, led the way forward into history, his path illuminated by the muzzle flashes of his guns and the burning determination to survive, to win, and to return home to the woman he loved. The roads leading to Bastogne were choked with retreating American troops. Exhausted infantry, their faces haggard and eyes hollow, trudged through the December snow. Artillery pieces, jeeps, and supply trucks crawled bumper to bumper in a desperate exodus. The news had spread like wildfire. The Germans had broken through the Ardennes forest in a massive counter-offensive. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. Captain James Montgomery stood in the turret of Thunderbolt III, the bitter cold biting at his exposed face. 6 months had passed since the breakout from Normandy. 6 months of relentless advance, of villages liberated and enemies vanquished, of comrades lost and replacements who barely had time to learn their crewmates' names before joining them in death. Now, for the first time since D-Day, they were moving backward. "Never seen anything like it," Sergeant Rawlins commented from beside him. "Whole damn army in retreat." Jack scanned the horizon where distant artillery flashes punctuated the gray winter sky. "Not the whole army. 101st Airborne is holding at Bastogne. We're going to help them." The radio crackled to life. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the static. "Iron 6, this is Steel 6. Priority message, over." Jack grabbed the handset. "Steel 6, this is Iron 6. Send your message, over. New orders from Division. Task Force Lovelady is being redirected to support the 101st at Bastogne. You'll be in the vanguard. Expect heavy resistance. German SS Panzer units confirmed in your path. Over." Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December cold. SS Panzer troops were the elite of the German armored forces, fanatically loyal to Hitler, and equipped with the best tanks in the German arsenal. "Understood, Steel 6. Any intelligence on enemy composition? Over." "Kampfgruppe Piper. At least a battalion of Panthers, plus Tigers. Infantry with Panzerfausts. They're not taking prisoners. Over." Jack absorbed this grimly. Joachim Piper was notorious for his brutality. The massacre at Normandy, where SS troops had murdered unarmed American prisoners, was still fresh news. "Copy that. Iron 6 out." Rawlins had heard the exchange. "Piper's butchers. This is going to get ugly." "Uglier than it already is," Jack agreed. He dropped down into the turret and switched to the intercom. "All crew, listen up. We're heading to Bastogne to relieve the 101st Airborne. SS Panzer units in our path. Prepare for heavy resistance." Inside Thunderbolt III, the atmosphere tensed. Doc Peterson methodically checked the ammunition supply. Martinez adjusted his bow machine gun, working the action to ensure it functioned perfectly despite the freezing temperatures. Wilson, the driver, whose cheerful demeanor had survived 6 months of combat, looked uncharacteristically somber. "What about Christmas?" he asked quietly. "Tomorrow's Christmas Eve." Jack had almost forgotten. The relentless pace of war had eroded normal timekeeping. Days blended into one another, marked only by battles and brief respites. "We'll celebrate when we reach Bastogne," Jack promised. "I've been saving some K-ration chocolate bars." The men chuckled weakly at the meager offering. Chocolate bars instead of turkey dinner. Steel hulls instead of family hearths. Jack thought of Elizabeth. After months of near misses and canceled leaves, he had finally seen her in November during a brief respite between operations. 3 days in Paris, a miracle arranged by Colonel Harrison as reward for the company's exceptional performance. 3 days that had sustained him through the subsequent weeks of brutal fighting. Elizabeth had changed, grown stronger somehow. The grief of their lost child had hardened her, but not made her bitter. She worked tirelessly at the field hospital, tending to wounded soldiers with unflinching compassion. They had promised each other that when the war ended, they would start anew, build the family they had dreamed of. Now, as winter closed in and the German counteroffensive threatened to undo months of Allied gains, that promise seemed further away than ever. The column of tanks moved steadily forward against the flow of retreating vehicles and men. Snow began to fall, reducing visibility and making the already treacherous roads more dangerous. Occasionally, the distant rumble of artillery fire punctuated the mechanical growl of tank engines. Near dusk, they reached a crossroads that would lead them directly toward Bastogne. Colonel Harrison's jeep waited there, the officer stamping his feet against the cold. "Montgomery," he called as Thunderbolt the 3 approached. "Hold here, new intelligence." Jack ordered the column to halt and climbed down from his tank. The snow was falling more heavily now, accumulating on his helmet and shoulders. Harrison unfolded a map on the hood of his jeep, weighing down the corners with rocks. "Reconnaissance reports enemy column moving along this road toward Bastogne. They'll intercept your route here, about 2 miles ahead. Looks like a reinforcement group heading to strengthen the siege." Jack studied the map. Strength? Hard to say in this weather. At least 5 tanks, probably Panthers, plus supporting vehicles. The critical information is this. Harrison pointed to a different position. Their column includes an 88mm anti-tank gun being towed. If they get that gun set up on this ridge overlooking Bastogne, they can dominate the southern approach. Jack nodded grimly. The German 88, originally designed as an anti-aircraft weapon, had proven devastatingly effective against tanks. His father had died to one in North Africa. "We need to intercept them before they reach the ridge," Jack concluded. "Exactly, but here's the complication." Harrison traced a route on the map. "This is the most direct path to intercept. But intelligence suggests the Germans have an observation post in this church spire with radio contact to their main force. If they spot you coming, they'll be ready." Jack considered the alternatives. They could take a longer route, avoiding detection but possibly missing the German column entirely. Or they could drive straight through, accepting the risk of a prepared enemy in exchange for certainty of engagement. "We'll take the direct route," he decided, "but Lieutenant Hope's platoon will lead, with orders to take out that church spire immediately." Lieutenant David Hope was the newest officer in the company, a replacement who had joined them just after the breakout from Normandy. Young and eager, he had quickly proven his competence in combat. "Good. Once you've engaged the column, hold position until the rest of Task Force Lovelady arrives. Then continue to Bastogne together." Harrison folded the map. "This could be the critical action, Montgomery. If that 88 gets established on the ridge, the 101st might not hold." "We'll stop them, sir." Harrison nodded, then hesitated before adding, "One more thing. Division's monitoring German radio traffic. They're referring to the column commander as Der Geist, the ghost. We think it might be Kurt Schneider." Jack felt as if the winter air had suddenly grown colder. "Schneider? He was sent to a POW camp in England." "Apparently not. Or he escaped. Either way, intelligence is confident it's him. I thought you should know, given your history. Kurt Schneider. Once a classmate, briefly an enemy, then a prisoner who had provided valuable intelligence. If he had indeed escaped and rejoined German forces, their paths were about to cross again under very different circumstances." "Thank you for telling me, sir." Harrison climbed back into his jeep. "Good hunting, Montgomery. The 101st is counting on you." As Jack returned to Thunderbolt the 3, he contemplated this new complication. Kurt had been a friend once. If they met in battle again, could Jack give the order to fire without hesitation? Would Kurt show similar restraint? There was no time to dwell on such questions. The column needed to move while daylight remained. Jack gathered his platoon leaders for a quick briefing, outlining the plan. Lieutenant Hope's platoon would lead, tasked with neutralizing the church observation post. Jack's platoon would follow, ready to engage the German column directly. Lieutenant Parker would bring up the rear as reserve. "Questions?" Jack concluded. Lieutenant Hope looked concerned. "Sir, if the observation post spots us and alerts the main column, we could be driving into an ambush." "That's why your first priority is taking out that church spire," Jack replied. "One well-placed high-explosive round should do it." "And if the column has already passed through?" Parker asked. Do we pursue or continue to Bastogne? We pursue. That 88 cannot reach the ridge. Jack checked his watch. We move out in 5 minutes. Good luck, gentlemen. As the officers returned to their tanks, Jack climbed into Thunderbolt 3's turret. His crew had overheard enough to understand the situation. So Schneider might be commanding that column? Rollins asked quietly. According to intelligence. Jack hesitated. If it is him, he knows our tactics, our tendencies. Be prepared for countermeasures. The column moved out as the winter day faded toward dusk. Snow continued to fall, reducing visibility and muffling the sound of their advance. Lieutenant Hope's platoon led 4 Sherman tanks in wedge formation, alert for any sign of the observation post. They rounded a bend in the road and the village appeared ahead, its stone buildings dusted with snow. The church steeple rose prominently above the other structures, a perfect vantage point for observers. There it is, Jack murmured. Hope should engage any second now. As if on cue, the lead Sherman fired its 76mm shell, striking the church steeple directly. Stone and debris erupted in a cloud that dissipated slowly in the still winter air. A second shot followed, collapsing the remains of the structure. Observation post neutralized, Parker reported over the radio. No sign of enemy response yet. Proceed through the village, Jack ordered. Maintain full alert. Infantry watch the upper windows. The tanks advanced cautiously into the village. Machine guns trained on potential ambush points. But the settlement appeared deserted, its inhabitants having fled the approaching front. They cleared the village without incident and continued toward the crossroads, where intelligence indicated they would intercept the German column. The snowfall intensified, creating a white curtain that limited visibility to a few hundred yards. Movement ahead, Martinez reported suddenly. Vehicle lights. Jack peered through his periscope. Faint headlights were visible through the snowfall, approaching from the east. All tanks, halt and take firing positions, he ordered. Target those vehicles, but hold fire until confirmed hostile. Thunderbolt 3 pulled alongside a stone farmhouse, using it as partial cover while maintaining a clear field of fire toward the approaching lights. The rest of the company spread out, establishing a horseshoe-shaped ambush position. As the lights drew nearer, Jack could make out the silhouettes of German vehicles. A half-track led the column, followed by the distinct shape of a Panther tank. Behind that came another vehicle towing what could only be the 88 Mortimer gun. Confirmed German column, Jack announced. Weapons free. Lieutenant Hope, target the lead tank. Lieutenant Parker, focus on the vehicle towing the 8. The American tanks opened fire simultaneously, the crash of their guns shattering the winter stillness. The lead Panther erupted in flames, hit by multiple shells. The half-track swerved off the road, its driver killed by machine gun fire. But the Germans recovered quickly, demonstrating the discipline and training of SS troops. The remaining Panthers deployed with precision, seeking cover behind buildings and terrain features. The vehicle towing the 88 reversed rapidly, attempting to withdraw from the engagement area. Don't let that gun escape, Jack ordered. Parker, pursue and destroy. Parker's platoon broke from their positions, racing to intercept the retreating gun. 2 Panthers moved to block them, initiating a swirling melee of tanks firing on the move. Jack directed Thunderbolt III into the fray, positioning to support Parker's pursuit. Through the snow and gathering darkness, he caught glimpses of the battle unfolding across the small valley. A Sherman from Hope's platoon brewed up, hit squarely by a Panther's 75mm gun. Another American tank lost a track but continued firing from its immobile position. Target Panther at 2 o'clock, 800 yards, Rollins called. Identified, Jack confirmed. Fire when ready. Thunderbolt III's 76mm gun roared. The shell struck the Panther's turret at an angle, failing to penetrate, but damaging the German tank's gun mantlet. Hit but not penetrating, loading again. The Panther swung its turret toward them, but before it could fire, a shell from another Sherman struck its flank, finding the thinner side armor. The German tank began to burn, its crew bailing out into the snow only to be cut down by machine gun fire. Sir, Parker reports the 88 is cornered but heavily defended, Martinez relayed. 2 Panthers plus infantry with Panzerfausts. They're pinned down. Jack made a rapid assessment. Hope's platoon was engaged with the remainder of the German force near the crossroads. Parker needed reinforcement to destroy the 88. Wilson, get us to Parker's position, maximum speed. Thunderbolt III surged forward, its tracks throwing up plumes of snow. They raced across the battlefield, weaving between burning vehicles and the occasional corpse half buried in snow. They crested a small rise and saw Parker's situation immediately. His three remaining Shermans were exchanging fire with two Panthers that had positioned themselves protectively in front of the now deployed 80mm gun. German infantry swarmed around the position, setting up machine guns and preparing anti-tank weapons. They're setting up the gun, Jack realized. If they get it operational, we're all dead. Orders, sir? Wilson asked. Jack made a split-second decision. Straight down the middle, maximum speed. We'll break through between the Panthers while Hope's platoon flanks from the left. That's suicide, Martinez muttered. That's necessity, Jack corrected. Parker, this is Montgomery. We're coming in fast between the Panthers. Be ready to exploit the gap. Hope, sweep in from the left when you see us engage. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Jack gave the order. Driver, forward. Thunderbolt 3 accelerated down the slope, building momentum for the charge. Jack dropped fully into the turret, buttoning up completely to present the smallest possible target. Rawlins, target the Panther on the right. Martinez, left side machine guns on the infantry. Doc, load armor piercing and stand by for rapid fire. The crew acknowledged, each man focused intently on his task as the tank hurtled toward the enemy position. They were committed now, using speed and audacity to overcome the superior German firepower. The Panthers spotted their approach and began traversing their turrets to engage. But Jack had anticipated this, timed their charge to catch the German tanks in the vulnerable process of shifting targets. Fire, Jack ordered, as they closed to point-blank range. Thunderbolt III's gun roared, the shell striking the right Panther at the junction of turret and hull. Almost simultaneously, the German tank fired, its shell passing so close to Thunderbolt that Jack felt the pressure wave. Hit confirmed. Panther disabled. The left Panther fired, its shell glancing off Thunderbolt's frontal armor at an extreme angle. Martinez's machine guns chattered, cutting down German infantry attempting to target them with Panzerfausts. They were between the Panthers now, racing directly toward the 88mm gun. Jack could see German gun crews frantically working to bring the weapon to bear, swinging its long barrel toward the charging Sherman. Ram it, Jack commanded. Full speed. Wilson gunned the engine to maximum power. Thunderbolt 3 crashed into the 88mm gun at nearly 30 miles per hour, the impact throwing the gun crew aside and knocking the weapon off its mount. The Sherman shuddered violently, its crew thrown against restraints, but maintained momentum through the German position. Back up and finish it, Jack ordered as they cleared the initial impact. Wilson reversed, bringing their gun to bear on the damaged 88. Rawlins didn't need to be told what to target. Thunderbolt's main gun fired, the high-explosive shell detonating among the scattered ammunition for the German gun. The secondary explosion lit up the battlefield, the 88 and its ammunition completely destroyed. Gun neutralized, Jack reported. Parker, clean up those infantry. Hope, status? 2 Panthers knocked out, sir, Hope replied. The remainder are withdrawing eastward. Jack surveyed the battlefield through his periscope. The German force was indeed retreating, having lost at least half their strength. The crucial 88mm gun lay in ruins, its threat to Bastogne eliminated. But as Thunderbolt III turned to pursue the retreating Germans, a lone figure stood in the road ahead. Even through the swirling snow, Jack recognized the silhouette immediately. The distinctive officer's cap, the tall stance, the characteristic way he held his arms slightly away from his body from an old fencing injury. Kurt Schneider. Hold fire, Jack ordered sharply. Wilson, stop the tank. Thunderbolt 3 ground to a halt about 50 yards from the German officer. For a moment, neither side moved. Then Kurt raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. Jack hesitated only briefly before opening his hatch and emerging into the bitter cold. Snow immediately began accumulating on his helmet and shoulders as he stood in the turret. James Montgomery, Kurt called, his voice carrying clearly in the winter air. I thought it might be you. Kurt, Jack acknowledged. You're a long way from that POW camp in England. Kurt smiled thinly. The British are not as thorough as they believe. Or perhaps I had help. It hardly matters now. They studied each other across the intervening space. Former friends, now definitively enemies. Behind Kurt, the remnants of his force continued to withdraw, while around Jack, American tanks moved into position, guns trained on the German officer. Your men are retreating, Jack observed. You should go with them. They have their orders. Mine were to ensure the 88 reached its position. Kurt glanced at the destroyed gun. I have failed in that task. Surrender, Kurt. The war is lost. You know it as well as I do. Kurt shook his head slowly. For me, perhaps. But Germany will fight to the last man, the last bullet. Hitler has ordered it. Is that why Piper's men are executing prisoners? Following orders? A shadow passed over Kurt's face. I am not Piper. My men do not commit such atrocities. Jack believed him. Despite everything, he still believed there was honor in his former friend. Then surrender. I can guarantee your safety. And spend the rest of the war in a camp? Kurt shook his head again. No, James, I would rather die fighting. Then why are you standing here talking to me? You could have retreated with your men. Kurt was silent for a moment, snowflakes gathering on his uniform. Perhaps I wanted to see you one last time, to remember that even in war, humanity can persist. He paused. Is Elizabeth well? The question caught Jack off guard. Kurt remembered Elizabeth from West Point, from Jack's stories and photographs. She's in Paris now with a field hospital. We lost a child earlier in the war. I am sorry to hear that, Kurt said, and seemed genuinely so. When this is over, you will have more children. A good life. For some of us, there is no after. It doesn't have to be that way. Kurt smiled sadly. We both know it does, James. For men like me, who have served the Reich, there is no forgiveness waiting. He straightened. I should go. My men need their commander. Jack knew he should stop him, capture him, but found himself unwilling to give the order. Kurt, do not worry about firing on my column, James. It is war, after all. Kurt saluted formally. Goodbye, my friend. Perhaps in another life, we will meet in better circumstances. He turned and walked away into the swirling snow, his figure growing indistinct and finally vanishing entirely. Jack remained in the turret, watching the empty space where Kurt had stood. Sir, Rollins called from below. Orders? Jack roused himself. Secure the area. Prepare to move out. We still need to reach Bastogne. He dropped back into the turret, closing the hatch against the intensifying snowfall. His crew watched him curiously but asked no questions about the German officer. They had all seen enough of war to understand that some things defied simple explanation. Wilson, get us back to the main road, Jack ordered. We've got airborne troops waiting for their Christmas presents. The column reformed and continued toward Bastogne, leaving the battlefield behind. The destroyed 80mm gun would never threaten the besieged 101st Airborne. The mission was accomplished, though at a cost of 2 Shermans and their crews. As they approached Bastogne, the signs of battle grew more pronounced. The roads were cratered by artillery fire, abandoned equipment littered the frozen fields, and occasionally they passed makeshift graves marked by rifles thrust into the ground. Helmets perched atop them. The perimeter established by the 101st came into view near dawn on Christmas Eve. Exhausted paratroopers manned foxholes in fighting positions, their faces brightening visibly at the sight of the approaching tanks. Never thought I'd be so happy to see tankers, a sergeant from the 101st greeted them at the checkpoint. You boys are the best Christmas present we could ask for. Heard you needed some help, Jack replied from his turret. What's the situation? Krauts have us surrounded on all sides. We're short on ammo, short on medical supplies, short on everything except guts. The sergeant grinned despite his exhaustion. But we're still here, and we ain't leaving. Jack's calm was directed to defensive positions around the town, dispersed to provide maximum coverage against the expected German assaults. Thunderbolt 3 was assigned to the southern approach, the direction from which they had just come. As his crew performed maintenance on their vehicle, Jack reported to the command post established in the town center. There he met Colonel McAuliffe, the acting commander of the 101st, famous now for his one-word reply to the Germans' surrender demand, nuts. Captain Montgomery, McAuliffe greeted him, your tanks are a welcome sight. We've been holding with just a few tank destroyers and a lot of determination. Task Force Lovelady is right behind us, sir. Should be here by tomorrow. We've eliminated an 88mm gun that was being positioned to command the southern approach. Good work. That gives us some breathing room. McAuliffe studied the situation map. Patton's Third Army is pushing north to break the siege, but it's slow going in this weather. We need to hold for at least another week. My company is at your disposal, sir. McAuliffe nodded appreciatively. Get your men some hot food and rest while you can. The Germans won't give us a Christmas truce. Jack returned to his tank to find his crew had scrounged a small Christmas tree, really just a pine branch, which they had attached to Thunderbolt's antenna. Bullet casings and strips of ration tin had been fashioned into makeshift ornaments. Merry Christmas, Captain, Martinez called. We saved you some real coffee, traded the airborne boys some ammunition for it. Jack accepted the steaming mug gratefully. the warmth seeping into his cold, numbed hands. Resourceful as always, Martinez. Got something else, too. Doc Peterson produced a battered box. Mail caught up with us. There's a letter for you, sir. Jack took the envelope, recognizing Elizabeth's handwriting immediately. He retreated to the relative privacy of the tank's turret to read it. My dearest Jack, she had written. The hospital is overflowing with wounded from the Ardennes fighting. The stories they tell are harrowing. A massive German offensive, complete surprise, chaos on the front lines. I find myself searching every ambulance that arrives, dreading the sight of your face among the wounded. Yet knowing that if you were hurt, at least you would be with me for a time. Is that terribly selfish? The doctors say we'll be evacuating soon if the German advance continues. Paris may not be safe. I volunteered to stay with the critical cases who cannot be moved. I know you would do no less in my position. They say the 101st Airborne is surrounded at Bastogne. I pray you are nowhere near that hell. I dream of our time together in Paris, those precious 3 days that sustain me through these dark times. I love you more than words can express. Stay safe, my darling. Come back to me. All my love, Elizabeth. Jack folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Elizabeth had no way of knowing he was now in the very place she hoped he would avoid, surrounded by German forces in the frozen fortress of Bastogne. The irony of war, always separating those who long to be together, always bringing together those who should remain apart, like himself and Kurt Schneider. Night fell on Christmas Eve, bringing with it a crystalline cold that seeped through clothing and into bones. Inside Thunderbolt 3, the crew huddled around a small stove they had rigged from an ammunition can, warming sea rations and reminiscing about Christmases past. My mom always made cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning, Wilson said wistfully. You could smell them through the whole house. Midnight mass, Martinez added. The church all lit up with candles. Then tamales when we got home. My grandmother's recipe. Sledding with my little brother, Doc Peterson contributed. Then hot chocolate with those little marshmallows floating on top. They looked at Rawlins, who rarely spoke of his past. The gunner shrugged. Not much for Christmas growing up. But last year in England before D-Day, the family I was billeted with made a proper Christmas dinner. Goose, pudding, the works. Said it was to thank us for coming to help. Captain, Wilson prompted, what about you? Jack thought back to Christmases at West Point, with Elizabeth visiting his family. The formal events, the traditions dating back generations. His father's absence always felt most keenly during the holidays. Church in the morning, and he said finally. Then dinner with all the military tradition. My grandfather would carve the turkey with his service saber. Said it was the only proper use for a sword in the modern era. They chuckled at that, the small laugh warming the cramped interior of the tank more than the improvised stove. When we get home, Jack continued, you're all invited to experience a proper Montgomery Christmas. Elizabeth is an excellent cook, and my grandfather would love to meet the men who've kept his grandson alive. I'd like that, sir, Martinez said softly. The others nodded agreement. The moment was interrupted by the distant crump of artillery, German guns beginning their nightly harassment of the American positions. The men tensed, listening to determine if the rounds were falling near their position. Merry Christmas to us, Rawlins muttered as the shelling intensified. Could be worse, Jack reminded them. We could be in foxholes like the infantry. They nodded soberly, aware of their relative good fortune. Even in the bitter cold, the tank's steel hull provided more protection than the shallow holes the paratroopers had managed to dig in the frozen ground. The radio crackled to life. All Thunderbolt elements, this is Iron 6. German movement detected on the southern perimeter. Likely probing attack. Stand to, over. Jack acknowledged the order, and the crew moved to their stations. The brief Christmas respite over. Through his periscope, Jack could see flares illuminating the night sky over the southern approach, where sentries had detected movement. Multiple vehicles, the radio reported. Tanks and infantry. Looks like they're testing our defenses. All tanks, hold fire until they're within 800 yards, Jack ordered. Let's not reveal our positions prematurely. The German force advanced cautiously, using the terrain for cover. Jack counted at least 5 tanks, probably Panthers, plus supporting infantry. A typical probing attack designed to identify defensive positions and weaknesses. They're approaching the minefield, the infantry commander reported. Should hit it any second now. On cue, explosions erupted along the German line of advance. One of the Panthers threw a track, immobilized by a mine. Infantry scattered, seeking cover in the snow-covered fields. They're committed now, Jack observed. All tanks, open fire. Target the mobile Panthers first. Thunderbolt the Fuhrer's gun roared, joined by the other Shermans positioned along the perimeter. The German attack faltered as two more Panthers were hit, their crews bailing out into the freezing night. The remaining German tanks returned fire, their shells more accurate than Jack would have expected in the darkness. A Sherman to their right took a direct hit, the crew evacuating before the ammunition cooked off. They knew exactly where we were, Jack realized. This isn't a probing attack. It's a deliberate attempt to reduce our tank strength. The firefight continued for nearly an hour before the Germans finally withdrew, leaving 3 destroyed Panthers and dozens of infantry casualties on the field. The Americans had lost 2 Shermans and suffered multiple infantry casualties from German artillery. As dawn broke on Christmas Day, Jack surveyed the battlefield from Thunderbolt's turret. The German dead lay where they had fallen, already covered by a fresh dusting of snow. No one ventured into the no man's land between the lines to recover them. Colonel McAuliffe appeared, accompanied by his staff. "Merry Christmas, Captain. I wish I had better presents for you and your men." "We're alive, sir. That's present enough." McAuliffe nodded grimly. "Intelligence suggests they're planning a major push tomorrow. All sides simultaneously. They're bringing up reinforcements, including heavy tanks. My company is down to 8 operational vehicles, sir." "I know. We're dispersing your tanks to support the most vulnerable sectors. Thunderbolt will remain here, covering the southern approach." McAuliffe hesitated. "There's something else. Aerial reconnaissance has identified what appears to be a King Tiger moving up to support the southern attack." Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold. The King Tiger, or Tiger II, was the most formidable tank in the German arsenal. Its 88 mm gun could penetrate a Sherman's armor at over 2 miles, while its own frontal armor was nearly impervious to American tank weapons. "Any chance it's Schneider's unit again?" Jack asked. "No way to know. But given your history with him, I thought you should be prepared for the possibility." Jack nodded, appreciating the consideration. "We'll be ready, sir." As McAuliffe departed, Rawlins approached. "Heard about the King Tiger, sir. Going to be a tough nut to crack." "We've faced worse," Jack replied. Though in truth, they hadn't. The King Tiger represented the pinnacle of German tank design, a behemoth that could destroy Thunderbolt before they even got within effective firing range. "What's the plan?" Jack considered their options. Direct confrontation was suicide. Withdrawal was impossible given their mission to defend Bastogne. They needed a third approach. "We'll use the terrain," he decided. "Set up a kill zone here, where the road dips between these ridges. If we can get the King Tiger to expose its thinner side or rear armor, we have a chance." Throughout Christmas Day, they prepared their defensive position, coordinating with the infantry to establish anti-tank positions and minefields that would channel the German attack into their kill zone. The remaining Shermans were positioned in hold-down locations where they could support without being directly exposed. Night fell, bringing a clear, star-filled sky and plummeting temperatures. The mercury dropped to 20 below zero, freezing equipment and challenging both defenders and attackers alike. Inside Thunderbolt 3, the crew took turns on watch, allowing each man brief periods of sleep. Jack found himself unable to rest, his mind racing with contingency plans and worst-case scenarios. If they failed to stop the German attack, Bastogne might fall, undermining the entire Allied position in the Ardennes. Thousands of lives depended on their ability to hold this frozen perimeter. Dawn brought renewed German artillery fire, more intense than previous days. The bombardment continued for hours, systematically targeting known American positions. Jack ordered his crew to button up completely, only his periscope exposed to observe the approaching threat. "Contact, southern approach," came the report over the radio. "Multiple tanks and mechanized infantry. They're making a major push." Jack swung his periscope toward the reported position. Through the swirling snow kicked up by artillery impacts, he could make out the shapes of German armor advancing in a wedge formation. Panthers formed the wings, with infantry using the tanks for cover. And at the point of the wedge, unmistakable even at this distance, the massive silhouette of a King Tiger. "All Thunderbolt elements, this is Iron 6. Enemy armor approaching from the south. Implement defensive plan, Echo. Hold fire until targets enter the kill zone." The American defenders waited tensely as the German force advanced methodically toward the prepared position. The King Tiger led the way, seemingly invulnerable in its confidence, while the Panthers provided flank security. "Almost there," Jack murmured, as the German tanks approached the dip in the road that marked the beginning of their kill zone. "Steady." The lead elements entered the prepared area. Infantry hit the first mines, the explosions throwing bodies and equipment into the air. The Panthers hesitated, their commanders suddenly aware of the trap. But the King Tiger pressed forward, either oblivious or contemptuous of the danger. It reached the center of the kill zone, momentarily exposing its side armor as it navigated the curve in the road. "Fire," Jack commanded. Every American gun opened fire simultaneously. Shermans, anti-tank guns, and bazooka teams all targeting the King Tiger at its most vulnerable point. Shells struck the massive tank from multiple angles, most bouncing off harmlessly, but a few finding weak points in the side armor. The King Tiger shuddered under the impact but continued forward, its thick armor absorbing punishment that would have destroyed any lesser vehicle. Its turret swung toward the nearest Sherman, the long 88mm gun seeking its target with deadly precision. "It's still operational," Jack reported. "All tanks, continue firing. Aim for the same point of impact. Concentrate your fire." The American tanks adjusted their aim, focusing on a spot where earlier shells had already weakened the German tank's armor. Shot after shot hammered the same location, gradually creating a vulnerable point in the otherwise impenetrable defense. The King Tiger fired, its shell destroying a Sherman instantly. The massive German tank began to turn, presenting its stronger frontal armor to the American guns while continuing to fire with devastating accuracy. "We're losing the advantage," Jack realized. "Wilson, move us to position Baker. We need a shot at their rear." Thunderbolt 3 backed away from its hull-down position, using a small ridge for cover as it maneuvered to a new firing position. The movement was risky, exposing them to fire from the Panthers that accompanied the King Tiger. But the Germans were fully engaged with the other American tanks, allowing Thunderbolt to reach its new position undetected. From this angle, they could see the King Tiger's rear deck, where the armor was thinnest. "Target identified," Rawlins reported. "Range 900 yards, engine compartment." "Fire when ready," Jack ordered. Rawlins took careful aim, compensating for distance and the slight crosswind. His finger tightened on the trigger. "On the way!" Thunderbolt's gun roared, the shell streaking toward the vulnerable rear of the King Tiger. It struck precisely where intended, penetrating the thinner armor and detonating inside the engine compartment. The German tank shuddered violently. Smoke began pouring from the engine deck, followed by flames as fuel and oil ignited. The fire spread rapidly, reaching the ammunition storage. Secondary explosions tore through the massive vehicle, blowing the turret completely off the hull in a catastrophic detonation. "Target destroyed," Jack announced. "Shift fire to the Panthers." With the King Tiger eliminated, the German attack lost momentum. The Panthers, now under concentrated fire from multiple directions, began a fighting withdrawal. Infantry scattered, seeking cover from the intensifying American fire. Within an hour, the attack had been repulsed completely. The burning hulk of the King Tiger dominated the battlefield, a testament to American determination and tactical ingenuity overcoming German technological superiority. As the smoke cleared, Jack emerged from Thunderbolt's turret to survey the aftermath. The snow around the destroyed King Tiger had melted from the intense heat, revealing the frozen ground beneath. German dead lay scattered across the battlefield, their bodies already stiffening in the extreme cold. Colonel McAuliffe appeared, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Impressive work, Captain. That King Tiger had us worried. Concentrated fire and proper positioning, sir, plus a healthy dose of luck." McAuliffe nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes that's the difference between victory and defeat." He gazed at the burning German tank. "We've had reports that Patton's forces are making good progress toward us. Relief could arrive within days. My men will hold until then, sir." "I know they will." McAuliffe clapped him on the shoulder. "Your father and grandfather would be proud, Montgomery. Damn proud." As the colonel departed, Jack noticed something near the destroyed King Tiger. A figure moving among the German dead, checking for survivors despite the danger of unexploded ammunition. Jack approached cautiously, his sidearm ready. As he drew nearer, he recognized the distinctive silhouette and stance. Kurt Schneider, somehow alive and searching through the carnage. Their eyes met across the battlefield. For a moment, neither moved. Then Kurt straightened, seemingly resigned to capture or death. But Jack found himself unwilling to raise his weapon. After all they had experienced, all the twists of fate that had repeatedly thrown them together on opposite sides of this war, he could not bring himself to be the instrument of Kurt's end. He turned away deliberately, giving his former friend the chance to disappear into the swirling snow. When he looked back moments later, Kurt was gone, leaving only footprints that were rapidly filling with fresh snowfall. Some bonds transcended the artificial divisions of war. Some debts could never be fully repaid. Jack returned to his tank, carrying the weight of his decision but feeling somehow that it was the right one. 3 days later, the lead elements of Patton's Third Army broke through the German lines, ending the siege of Bastogne. The defenders, who had held against overwhelming odds through the bitter cold and relentless attacks, greeted their rescuers with subdued joy, too exhausted for exuberant celebration. Jack's company, now reduced to just 6 operational tanks, was relieved from the front line for the first time since the German offensive began. They withdrew to a rear area for rest, repairs, and reinforcement. It was there, among the organized chaos of the supply area, that a jeep arrived carrying an unexpected visitor. Elizabeth stepped out, her Red Cross uniform partially covered by a heavy winter coat, her face pale with cold and fatigue. Jack, emerging from a briefing tent, stopped in disbelief. "Elizabeth, how?" She ran to him, embracing him fiercely. "I pulled every string, called in every favor. When I heard Bastogne had been relieved, I had to come." They held each other tightly, oblivious to the curious stares of passing soldiers. In that moment, the war receded, and they were simply a man and woman reunited against impossible odds. "I got your letter," Jack said softly. "I was already here when you wrote about hoping I was nowhere near Bastogne." Elizabeth laughed through tears. "Of course you were. Where else would James Montgomery be but at the center of the most desperate battle?" She touched his face gently. "You look terrible, by the way." "You look beautiful," he countered truthfully. Their reunion was brief, just 6 precious hours before Elizabeth had to return to her hospital duties. But in those hours, they reaffirmed the promise that had sustained them through the darkest days. When the war ended, they would build a life together, create the family they had dreamed of. As her jeep departed, Jack returned to Thunderbolt 3, where his crew waited respectfully. They had witnessed the reunion from a distance, understanding its significance to their commander. "She found you, sir," Rollins said simply. "That's a rare thing in this war." Jack nodded, unable to find words adequate to express what Elizabeth's brief visit had meant to him. How it had renewed his determination to survive, to see this conflict through to its conclusion. "New orders, gentlemen," he said finally. "We're being reassigned to Patton's Spearhead again. Moving out tomorrow, straight for Germany this time." The men absorbed this with the quiet resignation of veterans. The respite had been brief, but they had known it would be. The war continued, and their skills were needed at the front. "Germany," Martinez mused. "Never thought I'd actually see the place." "We'll see it," Jack assured him, "and then we'll come home." The next day, the reconstituted company moved out, following the advance elements of Patton's Third Army as they pushed the retreating Germans back toward their homeland. The Battle of the Bulge had been the Wehrmacht's last major offensive. Now it was the Allies' turn to deliver the final blows. Jack Montgomery led from the front, as his father and grandfather had done before him. The legacy of the Iron Montgomerys continued, forged in combat and tempered by sacrifice, pointing always toward home and the future that awaited beyond the war. And somewhere ahead, in the chaos of the collapsing Third Reich, Kurt Schneider fought his own battle for survival, bound to his former friend by experiences that transcended the artificial boundaries of nations at war. For both men, the end was approaching. Not the end of life, but the end of conflict. The day when tanks would fall silent, when soldiers would return to being civilians, when the business of living would replace the grim necessity of killing. That day could not come soon enough.